When Veronica Chen walked into that country club ballroom carrying her serving tray, she had no idea that the worst night of her life was about to become the best. A wealthy white couple was about to mock her in front of hundreds of people at their fancy anniversary party. But what happened next shocked everyone in that room, because someone very special was watching the whole thing. Someone who had been waiting to see exactly how they would treat her. And what Michael Jordan did next changed everything, not just for that night, but for the rest of her life. The champagne flutes clinked together in a symphony of celebration as Veronica Chen moved through the crowded ballroom with practiced grace, her serving tray balanced perfectly on her upturned palm. The Sterling Heights Country Club had seen countless events throughout its 100-year history, but tonight's anniversary gala for Bradford and Melanie Thornwood promised to be particularly memorable, with over 300 guests filling the marble-floored space beneath crystal chandeliers that cast dancing light across the assembled crowd. Veronica had worked at the club for almost 2 years now, putting herself through community college while supporting her younger brother Marcus, and she had learned to navigate these events with a smile that never quite reached her eyes, maintaining the invisible barrier between those who served and those who were served. She had seen wealth before, grown accustomed to the casual displays of affluence that characterized these gatherings, but something about tonight felt different, charged with an electricity she couldn't quite name. Bradford Thornwood stood near the bar with his wife Melanie, both of them flushed with champagne and self-satisfaction as they held court among a circle of admirers who laughed at every joke and nodded at every observation. Bradford was a commercial real estate developer who had made his fortune buying up properties in gentrifying neighborhoods, and Melanie came from old money that stretched back 3 generations, the kind of wealth that whispered rather than shouted, but made its presence known in every carefully chosen word and gesture. They were celebrating their 15th anniversary, and Melanie had insisted on sparing no exception, from the ice sculpture of 2 intertwined swans, to the live orchestra playing softly in the corner, to the menu that featured ingredients Veronica couldn't pronounce and probably couldn't afford to taste even with a month's wages. Veronica approached their circle with a fresh tray of hors d'oeuvre, her black serving uniform pressed crisp, and her hair pulled back into a neat bun that her grandmother had helped her perfect that morning. She had been raised to take pride in her work, no matter what that work might be, and her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind as it always did during these events, reminding her that dignity came from within and could never be taken away by circumstance or the cruelty of others. She extended the tray toward the group with a polite smile, her voice soft but clear as she offered them the delicate pastries topped with caviar and creme fraiche. Melanie Thornwood looked at the tray, then looked at Veronica, and something cold flickered across her features. "Oh, goodness, Bradford, look at this," she said, her voice carrying that particular pitch that made Veronica's stomach tighten with instinctive warning. "I suppose they'll hire just anyone these days, won't they?" The words hung in the air like smoke, and the conversation around them stuttered to a halt, as heads turned to watch what would happen next. Veronica kept her expression neutral, her training taking over as she reminded herself that she needed this job, that Marcus was counting on her to pay the rent and keep food on their table, that her own dreams of finishing her degree in social work depended on her ability to endure moments like these with grace. Bradford laughed, a sharp bark of sound that held no warmth, and picked up one of the pastries between his thumb and forefinger as if it might contaminate him. "Well, it's an anniversary party, darling, not a job interview," he said, examining the food with exaggerated scrutiny. "Though I must say, I'm surprised the club standards have slipped so far. I remember when they were quite particular about who they allowed to serve at these functions." His eyes moved to Veronica's face, traveling over her features with deliberate slowness that made her skin crawl. "Tell me, sweetheart, did you at least wash your hands before touching our food? One can never be too careful about where things have been." The circle around them had grown larger now, other guests drawn by the confrontation like moths to flame. and Veronica felt the weight of their stares pressing against her from all sides. She wanted to say something, to defend herself, to point out that she had graduated top of her high school class and was maintaining a perfect grade point average while working 2 jobs. That she volunteered at a youth center every Saturday teaching kids to read. That her worth as a human being had nothing to do with the color of her skin or the uniform she wore. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped behind the professional smile she had learned to maintain no matter what insults were thrown her way, and she simply nodded and said that all health and safety protocols were always followed to the letter. Melanie reached out and plucked the tray from Veronica's hands, her perfectly manicured nails gleaming under the chandelier light. "I think we'll just hold on to this, dear," she said with false sweetness. "We wouldn't want you to drop it and make a mess. I'm sure cleaning up after yourself isn't really your strong suit." She turned to her husband with a conspiratorial smile. "Remember that article we read about how crime rates have gone up in the neighborhoods where they're building those affordable housing units? Makes you think twice about who you let into your space, doesn't it?" Bradford nodded sagely, as if his wife had just shared some profound wisdom rather than barely veiled bigotry, and the crowd around them murmured in agreement, their faces reflecting varying degrees of amusement and discomfort, but none of them willing to speak up or challenge what was happening. Veronica felt something crack inside her chest, a hairline fracture in the armor she had built up through years of similar encounters, though none quite as public or as cruel as this one. She thought about her grandmother, about the stories she had shared of her own experiences working in white households during the civil rights era, about the quiet dignity she had maintained even when treated as less than human, and Veronica drew on that strength now as she straightened her spine and met Melanie's gaze directly. "Is there anything else you need, ma'am?" she asked, her voice steady despite the trembling she felt in her hands. "I'd be happy to bring you fresh drinks or check if your dinner table is ready." Bradford stepped closer to her, invading her personal space in a way that felt deliberately threatening. "What we need," he said slowly, "is for you to understand your place. This is a private club, a place for people of a certain caliber, and we pay good money to maintain certain standards. Now I'm sure you're doing the best you can with what you've been given, but perhaps you'd be more comfortable working somewhere more suited to your background." He gestured vaguely around the room. "Maybe one of those urban establishments where they're less concerned about presentation and propriety. I could even make some calls if you'd like. I know several restaurant owners in less desirable parts of town who might be willing to take you on." The humiliation washed over Veronica in waves, and she felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. She was aware of the dozens of eyes watching her, of the phones that had been subtly raised to record this confrontation, of the way some guests were shaking their heads in disapproval while others smiled behind their hands, as if this were entertainment provided for their amusement. She opened her mouth to respond, though she had no idea what she would say, when a deep voice cut through the tension like a knife through silk. "I think the only people who need to understand their place here are you two." The words came from behind the crowd, and people turned and then immediately parted like water around stone as a tall figure moved through them with unhurried confidence. Veronica's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the man approaching, his presence so unexpected in this context that for a moment she thought she might be hallucinating from stress. Michael Jordan moved through the gathered crowd with the same grace he had once shown on the basketball court, his expensive suit tailored perfectly to his frame, his expression calm but with something hard and unyielding in his eyes that made even the boldest guests step back and give him room. Bradford and Melanie stood frozen, their faces cycling through shock, confusion, and dawning recognition as one of the most famous athletes in the world stopped directly in front of them and crossed his arms over his chest. Michael's gaze moved from them to Veronica, and his expression softened slightly as he gave her a small nod of acknowledgement before returning his attention to the couple who had been tormenting her. "I'm going to give you both about 30 seconds to apologize to this young woman," he said conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than calling out their behavior in front of hundreds of witnesses. And then I'm going to tell you a story about how I came to be at this party tonight and about the real standards of character that seem to be lacking in this room. Melanie found her voice first, though it came out higher and more strained than her earlier confident drawl. "Mr. Jordan, this is such an honor. We're huge fans. Bradford and I have season tickets to the Hornets, and we followed your entire career. This is just a misunderstanding, you see. We were simply concerned about the quality of service and making sure our guests were properly taken care of." She was babbling now, her carefully constructed poise crumbling under Michael's steady gaze, and Bradford put a hand on her arm as if to quiet her, though his own face had gone pale and waxy with what might have been fear or embarrassment, or some combination of both. Michael held up a hand, silencing her mid-sentence. "I didn't ask for your excuses," he said quietly, but his voice carried across the now silent ballroom with perfect clarity. "I asked for an apology. To her, not to me." He gestured toward Veronica, who was still standing there clutching her empty hands together, trying to process the surreal turn this evening had taken. "Because that young woman has done nothing wrong except her job, and do it well from what I observed before I came over here. You two, on the other hand, have shown everyone in this room exactly what kind of people you are, and it's not a pretty picture." Bradford cleared his throat, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape route or perhaps hoping someone would come to his defense. But the crowd remained silent and still, unwilling to insert themselves into a confrontation with someone of Michael Jordan's stature and reputation. "Look, Mr. Jordan, with all due respect, you don't understand the full context here. This club has certain expectations, certain traditions that we try to maintain, and we were simply upholding those standards in our own way. Perhaps we were a bit too direct in our communication, but our intentions were never to cause offense or distress." His words tumbled out in a rush, each excuse weaker than the last, and Veronica could see the sweat beading on his forehead despite the air-conditioned coolness of the ballroom. Michael's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, becoming even more imposing despite his stillness. "Your time's up," he said flatly. "Since you're both apparently incapable of basic human decency, let me tell you how I ended up here tonight." He turned slightly, addressing not just Bradford and Melanie, but the entire assembled crowd, his voice taking on the cadence of someone used to commanding attention and respect. 3 weeks ago, I was having dinner at a small restaurant across town. Nothing fancy, just a place that serves good food and treats people right. I was sitting at the bar, trying to have a quiet meal, when I noticed the waitress working that night going above and beyond for every single customer, including me, even though she clearly didn't recognize who I was. She was kind to the elderly couple struggling with the menu, patient with the rowdy college kids who couldn't decide what to order, and professional even when one customer got belligerent and threw his drink because he thought his steak was overcooked. Veronica's mind raced backward, trying to place the memory, and suddenly it clicked into focus with startling clarity. 3 weeks ago at Rosie's Diner, where she picked up shifts on weekends, that quiet man at the bar who had left a $1,000 tip on a $40 meal with a note thanking her for her kindness and professionalism. She had thought it was a mistake at first, had chased him down in the parking lot to make sure he understood what he had written, and he had smiled and told her to keep it, that good people deserved good things. She had been so focused on his generosity that she hadn't looked closely enough at his face, hadn't made the connection to the basketball legend whose posters had covered her brother's bedroom walls throughout his childhood. "That waitress was Veronica," Michael continued, gesturing toward her, and she felt every eye in the room swing back to her with renewed interest. "After that night, I did what I always do when someone impresses me. I looked into her story, learned about her life, discovered that she's putting herself through school while raising her younger brother after their parents died in a car accident 4 years ago. Found out she maintains a perfect grade point average while working 3 jobs, that she volunteers her free time helping at-risk youth, that she's exactly the kind of person who makes communities stronger and better. So when I received my invitation to this party tonight, courtesy of a mutual business acquaintance who thought I might enjoy the networking opportunity, I decided to accept. Because I wanted to see how Veronica was treated in a different environment, wanted to see if the wealthy folks at the country club would show her the same respect she shows everyone she encounters. The silence in the ballroom was absolute now, broken only by the soft clink of ice in glasses and the barely audible whisper of the orchestra's instruments being set down as even they stopped playing to listen. Bradford's face had gone from pale to bright red, splotches of color spreading across his cheeks like spilled wine, and Melanie was staring at the floor as if she might find escape in the patterns of the marble tiles. Veronica felt dizzy, her world tilting sideways as she tried to process what Michael was saying, the revelation that he had been watching over her, that he had orchestrated his presence here tonight, specifically because he cared about what happened to her. "What I witnessed tonight disgusted me," Michael said, his voice dropping lower and somehow becoming even more powerful in its quiet intensity. "I watched you two mock and belittle someone who has more character in her little finger than both of you have in your entire bodies. I heard you question her cleanliness, her competence, her right to even exist in this space, and I saw the way you enjoyed her discomfort, the way you used your privilege and position to make someone else feel small because it made you feel big." He paused, letting his words sink in, and Veronica saw several people in the crowd wiping at their eyes, moved by his defense of her in ways their own consciences had apparently not motivated them to act. Bradford tried one more time to salvage the situation, his voice cracking slightly as he spoke. "Mr. Jordan, please, you have to understand, we meant no real harm. It was just conversation, just talking. We never intended for things to escalate like this. Surely you can appreciate that sometimes words come out wrong, that intentions don't always match impact. We're willing to apologize if that's what you want, if that's what it takes to move past this unfortunate incident." He reached out as if to put his hand on Michael's arm, but pulled back when Michael's gaze dropped to the outstretched fingers, with an expression that clearly communicated such contact would not be welcome. Michael shook his head slowly, and something almost like sadness crossed his features. "The problem, Bradford, is that your words came out exactly right for what you meant to communicate. You wanted to humiliate Veronica, wanted to assert your superiority over her, wanted to remind her and everyone watching that you see her as less than human, less deserving of basic respect and dignity. And the truly tragic thing is that you don't even understand why that's wrong. You can't see past your own prejudice and privilege to recognize the damage you do with your casual cruelty." He turned to address the wider crowd again, his voice rising to fill every corner of the massive room. "This is what racism looks like in the modern age, folks. It's not always burning crosses and white hoods. Sometimes it's champagne and country clubs, and people who think their wealth and status give them the right to treat others as inferior based on the color of their skin." Veronica found her voice finally, though it came out shakier than she would have liked. "Miss Jordan, I don't know what to say. I never expected anyone to stand up for me like this. I'm so grateful, but I don't want to cause more trouble. I need this job, and I can't afford to make enemies of important club members." She hated how small she sounded, how the years of conditioning to accept mistreatment in silence had trained her to minimize her own pain and prioritize the comfort of those who caused it. But she was also acutely aware of the practical realities of her life and the precarious nature of her financial situation. Michael walked over to her, closing the distance between them, and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're not causing trouble, Veronica. They caused trouble when they decided to treat you like you were less than them. And as for this job, well, that brings me to the interesting part of tonight's story. He turned back to Bradford and Melanie, who were now clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. "See, what you two don't know is that I've been in negotiations for the past 6 months to purchase a controlling interest in the Sterling Heights Country Club. The current owners were looking to diversify their holdings, and I was looking for a good investment opportunity in an area with growth potential. The deal closed yesterday, which makes me, as of this morning, the majority owner of this establishment." The crowd erupted in gasps and excited murmurs, the revelation sending shockwaves through the assembled guests, who were suddenly recalculating their own relationships and standing within the club's social hierarchy. Veronica's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief, while Bradford and Melanie looked as if they might actually faint from shock and horror. The reality of their situation was clearly dawning on them. The understanding that they had not only insulted and degraded an employee, but had done so in front of her new employer, someone with the power and influence to make their lives very uncomfortable. "Now, as the new owner, one of my first priorities is going to be implementing some significant changes around here," Michael continued, his voice taking on a business-like tone that somehow made his words even more devastating. "Starting with a comprehensive review of our membership policies and the behavior standards we expect from our members. I'm thinking mandatory diversity training for everyone, strict consequences for harassment or discrimination of any kind, and a complete overhaul of how we treat our staff members." He looked directly at Bradford and Melanie. "I'm also thinking that members who can't meet those basic standards of human decency might find their memberships revoked, regardless of how much money they have or how long their families have been associated with this club." Bradford's legs seemed to give out, and he sank down onto a nearby chair, his face now completely drained of color. Melanie was crying openly, her mascara running in black streaks down her cheeks. All her earlier confidence and cruelty evaporated in the face of consequences for her actions. "Please, Mr. Jordan, you can't do this. This club is our whole social life. All our friends are here. We've been members for over a decade. My family has been coming here since the club opened. You can't just throw us out because of one mistake, one moment of poor judgment. Surely there's some way we can make this right. Some way to prove we've learned from this experience." Melanie's voice was ragged with desperation, and Veronica felt an unexpected pang of something that might have been pity, though it was quickly overwhelmed by the memory of how these same people had made her feel just minutes earlier. Michael was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between the Thornwoods and Veronica, seeming to weigh something in his mind. "Here's what's going to happen," he said finally. "Bradford and Melanie, you're going to make a real apology to Veronica, right here, right now, in front of all these witnesses. Not a half-hearted excuse or a minimization of what you did, but a genuine acknowledgement of how you hurt her and why it was wrong. Then you're going to make a donation of $50,000 to the scholarship fund I'm establishing tonight for students like Veronica who are working their way through college. And finally, you're going to volunteer for the next year at the youth center, where Veronica teaches reading every Saturday, so you can learn firsthand about the community and people you've spent so much energy looking down on." He paused, letting the terms sink in. "If you do all of that, and if Veronica is willing to accept your apology, then we'll call it a learning experience, and you can keep your membership. But if you refuse, or if I hear about you treating any staff member or any person of color with anything less than complete respect going forward, you'll be permanently banned from this club, and I'll make sure every other club in the state knows exactly why. The choice is yours, but you need to make it right now, because I'm done wasting time on people who can't treat others with basic human dignity." Bradford and Melanie looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them, and then they turned to face Veronica. They walked toward her slowly, and Veronica instinctively stepped back, her body still remembering their earlier aggression, even as her mind tried to process the dramatic reversal of power dynamics. Bradford spoke first, his voice rough and uncertain. "Veronica, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the things I said to you, for the way I treated you, for making you feel less than the remarkable person you clearly are. There's no excuse for my behavior. None at all. I was cruel because I could be, because I've lived my whole life thinking my money and my status gave me the right to treat people however I wanted, especially people I saw as beneath me. But you're not beneath anyone, and I was wrong, so terribly wrong, to suggest otherwise. Melanie was sobbing harder now, her words coming out in hiccuping gasps. I'm so ashamed of myself, of what I said to you, of who I've become. My mother raised me better than this, taught me to treat everyone with kindness, but somewhere along the way I forgot those lessons. I let wealth and privilege turn me into someone ugly and mean. You didn't deserve any of what we said to you, didn't deserve to be humiliated and mocked for simply doing your job and doing it well. I'm so sorry, and I know words aren't enough, but I promise I'm going to do better, be better, if you'll give me the chance to prove I can change. Veronica looked at them, really looked at them, seeing not the confident bullies from before, but two frightened people confronting perhaps for the first time the ugliness of their own prejudices and behavior. She thought about her grandmother again, about the grace and forgiveness she had always shown, even to those who had wronged her, about the power of choosing mercy over vengeance. She thought too about her brother Marcus, about the world she wanted to help build for him and for all the young people she worked with, a world where people could grow and change and become better versions of themselves. I accept your apology, she said quietly, and she was surprised to find she meant it, that something in their brokenness spoke to something in her own wounded heart. Not because what you did was okay, because it wasn't, but because I believe people can change if they truly want to, and I hope you'll use this as an opportunity to examine your beliefs and do the hard work of becoming more compassionate human. Michael smiled then, a genuine expression of warmth that transformed his entire face. That takes real strength, Veronica, more strength than most people have. You should be proud of yourself. He turned to address the crowd one final time. Let this be a lesson to everyone here tonight. Wealth and status mean nothing if they're not accompanied by character and compassion. The measure of a person isn't found in their bank account or their family name or the color of their skin. It's found in how they treat others, especially those who have less power and privilege than they do. I hope you'll all remember Veronica's grace and dignity tonight, and I hope you'll think twice before you ever treat another human being as less than deserving of respect. The crowd erupted in applause, genuine and thunderous, and Veronica felt tears streaming down her face now, no longer from humiliation, but from an overwhelming mixture of relief and gratitude and disbelief at how dramatically the evening had turned around. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, which he handed to her. Inside is information about a full scholarship to finish your degree, along with a job offer to work in the community outreach program I'm developing through the club, with a salary that will let you quit your other jobs and focus on your studies and your brother. You've earned it, Veronica, not because of what tonight, but because of who you are and how you've chosen to live your life. She opened the envelope with trembling hands, reading the letter inside that outlined a scholarship covering all her remaining tuition and expenses, plus a position with a salary 3 times what she had been making from her combined jobs. The numbers blurred as fresh tears filled her eyes, and she looked up at Michael with an expression of wonder. Why are you doing this for me? You don't even know me, not really, just from one shift at a diner and tonight. Why would you go to all this trouble for a stranger? Michael's expression grew thoughtful, distant, as if he were looking at something far beyond the walls of the ballroom. Because someone did it for me once, when I was young and struggling and didn't know if I'd ever make it out of the circumstances I was born into. A teacher saw something in me, believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and helped me find the path that led to everything I've achieved. I've never forgotten that kindness, that investment in my potential, and I've spent my life trying to pay it forward, trying to be for others what that teacher was for me. When I see someone like you, someone who's working 3 jobs and still finding time to help others, still maintaining their dignity and kindness in the face of adversity, I see that same potential I once had, and I want to help nurture it, help you reach the heights I know you're capable of reaching. Bradford and Melanie were still standing nearby, looking lost and uncertain, and Michael turned his attention back to them. That meant what I said about the scholarship donation and the volunteer work. My assistant will be in touch with the details next week. Consider this your chance at redemption, your opportunity to become the kind of people you should have been all along. Don't waste. They nodded mutely, chastened and humbled, and quietly slipped away toward the exit, their anniversary party effectively over, even as it continued to swirl around them in excited conversation about everything that had transpired. The orchestra began playing again, and gradually the party resumed its earlier rhythm, though now the energy was different, charged with a sense of having witnessed something significant, something that would be talked about for years to come in the halls and dining rooms of the Sterling Heights Country Club. Veronica found herself surrounded by other staff members, her colleagues offering hugs and congratulations and sharing their own stories of similar mistreatment they had endured in silence. Several club members approached as well, apologizing for not speaking up during the confrontation, acknowledging their own complicity in maintaining a culture that allowed such behavior to flourish. As the evening wore on, Michael stayed close to Veronica, introducing her to people as his guest rather than as an employee, making it clear through his actions and words that she was deserving of respect and recognition. He told her stories about his own journey, about the obstacles he had faced and overcome, about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who believed in you and pushed you to be better. He talked about his plans for the club, his vision of creating a space that truly served the community rather than just catering to an exclusive elite, and he asked for her input and ideas, treating her as a valued advisor rather than someone whose opinions didn't matter. At one point, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the golf course bathed in moonlight, Veronica turned to him with a question that had been building inside her all evening. What if I'm not good enough? What if I take this opportunity and I fail? What if I can't live up to your expectations or justify your faith in me? I've spent so long just trying to survive, trying to keep my head above water, that I'm not sure I know how to do anything else, how to actually reach for something bigger and believe I can achieve it. Michael was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. You want to know what I see when I look at you, Veronica? I see someone who has already succeeded in ways most people never will. You've maintained your integrity and kindness in circumstances that would have broken someone with less character. You've put someone else's needs, your brother's needs, above your own comfort and desires. You've shown up day after day, doing hard work for little recognition or reward, simply because it was the right thing to do. That's not someone who's just surviving. That's someone who's thriving against incredible odds. The question isn't whether you're good enough, it's whether the world is ready for everything you're going to accomplish once you have the resources and opportunities you deserve. His words settled over her like a blanket, warm and comforting, and for the first time in years, Veronica allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could be something more than an endless cycle of struggle and sacrifice. She thought about Marcus, about being able to give him a stable home and the chance to pursue his own dreams without having to worry about money or making ends meet. She thought about finishing her degree, about the career in social work she had always wanted, about helping other young people navigate the challenges she had faced. She thought about the youth center and the kids she taught, about having more time and energy to invest in their futures now that she wouldn't be working herself to exhaustion just to survive. "Thank you," she said finally, the words inadequate to express the depth of her gratitude, but the only ones she could find. "Thank you for seeing me, for standing up for me, for believing I'm worth investing in. I promise I won't let you down. I'll work harder than I've ever worked to make the most of this chance you're giving me." Michael smiled and shook his head. "You don't owe me anything, Veronica. This isn't a debt you need to repay. It's a gift freely given because you've already earned it through who you are and how you live. The only thing I ask is that you pay it forward someday, that when you're in a position to help someone else the way I'm helping you tonight, you remember this moment and you extend that same grace and opportunity to them. That's how we change the world, one act of kindness at a time, one person investing in another's potential, until we create a ripple effect that spreads further than we can possibly imagine." The night continued, and Veronica moved through it in a daze of happiness and disbelief, accepting congratulations and good wishes from people who, hours earlier, wouldn't have given her a second glance. The manager of the club approached her with profuse apologies for not intervening during the confrontation, and Michael immediately addressed that issue as well, making it clear that staff protection protocols would be part of his management reforms. Several members approached her to share their own stories of experiencing or witnessing discrimination, and conversations began about how the club could become more inclusive and welcoming to people from all backgrounds. As midnight approached and the party began to wind down, Michael walked Veronica out to her car, an aging sedan that was held together more by hope and determination than actual mechanical soundness. He looked at it with an appraising eye, then pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "My dealership is going to have a new car ready for you by Monday," he said when he hung up. "Something reliable and safe, because you and Marcus deserve better than worrying about whether you'll make it to work or school every day." When she started to protest, he held up a hand. "Consider it part of your compensation package for the new job. Every employee deserves a reliable vehicle, and I take care of the people who work with me." She drove home that night in her rattling car, her mind spinning with everything that had happened, the envelope with the scholarship and job offer sitting on the passenger seat like tangible proof that she hadn't dreamed the entire surreal evening. When she got back to the small apartment she shared with Marcus, she found him awake despite the late hour, hunched over his homework at the kitchen table. He looked up when she entered, his face brightening. "How was work? Did you make good tips tonight?" Then he noticed her expression, the tears still damp on her cheeks, the strange mixture of emotions playing across her features. "Ronnie, what happened? Are you okay? Did someone hurt you?" She sat down beside him and told him everything, watching his face cycle through anger at how the Thornwoods had treated her, amazement at Michael Jordan's intervention, and sheer joy at the scholarship and job offer that would change both their lives. When she finished, he threw his arms around her in a fierce hug, and they both cried together, releasing years of accumulated stress and fear and exhaustion. "We're going to be okay," she whispered into his hair. "For the first time since Mom and Dad died, we're actually going to be okay. Better than okay. We're going to thrive." The next morning, Veronica woke up half convinced the previous night had been an elaborate dream, but the envelope on her nightstand confirmed the reality of everything that had transpired. She called the number Michael had given her and spoke with his assistant, who began the process of enrolling her in the new position and coordinating the scholarship paperwork. Over the following weeks, she transitioned into a new role, working with Michael to develop community outreach programs that would serve underprivileged youth throughout the area. She discovered that he was genuine in his desire to make a difference, that his wealth and fame hadn't isolated him from caring about others or understanding the struggles of ordinary people. Bradford and Melanie kept their word as well, making their donation and showing up at the youth center for their volunteer shifts. The first Saturday they appeared, Veronica watched them carefully, looking for signs of resentment or half-hearted effort. But what she saw instead surprised her. They were awkward and uncertain, clearly out of their element, but they genuinely tried to connect with the kids and contribute something meaningful. Melanie worked with a group of young girls on a reading project, and Veronica overheard her talking about her own childhood about the books that had meant something to her, speaking with a vulnerability and honesty that seemed to surprise even herself. Bradford spent his time helping with building maintenance and repairs, getting his hands dirty in a way he probably never had before, and Veronica caught him one afternoon teaching a group of boys basic carpentry skills, his earlier arrogance replaced by something like humility. It didn't erase what they had done, didn't make their initial cruelty acceptable, but it demonstrated that people could change, that confronting our worst impulses and prejudices could lead to genuine growth if we were willing to do the uncomfortable work of self-examination and transformation. Months passed, and Veronica flourished in her new position, her natural empathy and understanding of the challenges facing at-risk youth, making her invaluable to the program's development and success. She finished her degree ahead of schedule, graduating with honors and immediately enrolling in a master's program that Michael's foundation agreed to fund. Marcus thrived as well, his grades improving now that he didn't have to worry about his sister working herself into the ground to support them, and he began talking about his own dreams of becoming an engineer, dreams that now seemed achievable rather than impossible fantasies. The Sterling Heights Country Club underwent its own transformation under Michael's ownership, slowly evolving from an exclusive enclave of privilege to a more diverse and welcoming space that genuinely served the broader community. The changes weren't universally popular. Some longtime members left in protest, but they were replaced by new members who appreciated the club's new mission and values. Staff morale improved dramatically as employment practices were reformed, and a culture of respect and appreciation replaced the old hierarchy of service and entitlement. 1 year after that fateful anniversary party, Michael organized a gala fundraiser for the scholarship fund that now bore Veronica's name, the Chen Family Scholarship for students overcoming significant obstacles to pursue higher education. Hundreds of people attended, including Bradford and Melanie, who had completed their year of volunteer service and had become, if not friends, then at least allies in the work of creating positive change. They approached Veronica during the event, and Melanie spoke with tears in her eyes about how the experience had fundamentally changed her understanding of herself and the world. "I don't expect you to forgive me, not completely, because what I did was unforgivable," Melanie said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I want you to know that I'm grateful for what happened that night. Grateful that someone finally held up a mirror and made me see what I had become. The year I've spent volunteering, the kids I've gotten to know, the stories I've heard about struggles and challenges I never had to face. It's opened my eyes in ways I didn't know were possible. I'm not the same person I was a year ago, and while I can't undo the hurt I caused, I can commit to being better going forward, to using my privilege and resources to help rather than harm." Bradford nodded in agreement. "We've established our own scholarship fund as well, specifically for students of color pursuing degrees in business and real estate, because we recognize that industries like ours have been gate-kept for far too long by people who look like us and think like we used to think. It's a small gesture, doesn't make up for a lifetime of prejudice and casual racism, but it's a start, and we're committed to continuing this work for the rest of our lives." Veronica listened to them, and she felt something shift in her chest, a release of the anger and resentment she hadn't fully realized she was still carrying. "I do forgive you," she said, surprising herself with the truth of the statement. "Not because you've earned it necessarily, though you've certainly tried, but because holding on to anger was only hurting me, keeping me tied to that moment of humiliation and pain. I choose to forgive you so I can fully move forward into the life I'm building, the life Michael helped me see was possible." As the gala continued around them, Michael took the stage to speak about the scholarship fund and its mission, but also about the broader lessons of that night 1 year ago. What happened at the Thornwood anniversary party could have just been another ugly moment of racism and privilege asserting itself over dignity and humanity. Instead, because of Veronica's grace and the willingness of everyone involved to engage in hard conversations and real change, It became a catalyst for transformation, not just for individuals but for an entire community. That's the power we all have, in every moment, to choose whether our actions will perpetuate harm or create healing, whether we'll use our influence to build walls or bridges. He spoke about the importance of calling out injustice when we see it, of not remaining silent in the face of cruelty or discrimination, of using whatever platform or privilege we have to lift up others and create opportunities for those who have been systematically denied them. He talked about the dozens of students who had already benefited from the scholarship fund. Young people like Veronica, who had the talent and determination to succeed, but lacked the financial resources to access education and opportunity. He announced an expansion of the program, a partnership with other businesses and organizations throughout the state to create a network of support for underprivileged students pursuing higher education. When he finished speaking, he called Veronica up to the stage, and she stood beside him as the crowd applauded. No longer the anonymous waitress being mocked and degraded, but a recognized leader in the community, someone whose story had inspired others and whose work was making a tangible difference in young people's lives. She thought about how far she had come in just 1 year, how dramatically her circumstances had changed, and she felt overwhelming gratitude not just for Michael's intervention, but for her own resilience, for the strength she had maintained even in her darkest moments, for the choice she had made to forgive rather than remain bitter. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Michael pulled Veronica aside one more time, his expression serious. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice quiet enough that no one else could hear. "That night at the diner, when I left you that tip and the note, I was at a low point in my life. I'd been dealing with some personal struggles, questioning whether anything I'd accomplished actually mattered, wondering if wealth and fame were ultimately empty achievements if they didn't connect to something deeper, something meaningful. Watching you work that night, seeing how you treated everyone with kindness regardless of how they treated you, witnessing your grace under pressure when that customer threw his drink, it reminded me why I do what I do, why I've tried to use my platform for good, rather than just personal enrichment." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You saved me that night as much as I saved you at the party. You reminded me that there are still good people in the world, people who choose dignity and compassion, even when it would be easier to become bitter and angry. So when I say I wanted to help you, it's not just charity or noblesse oblige. It's genuine gratitude for helping me find my way back to my own values and purpose. You gave me a gift at that diner, and everything I've done since has just been my attempt to honor that gift by paying it forward." Veronica felt tears welling up again, moved by his vulnerability and honesty. "I think we saved each other," she said softly. "You showed me that I didn't have to accept mistreatment as the price of survival, that there were people in the world who would stand up for what's right even when it cost them nothing to remain silent. You gave me permission to believe in my own worth, to reach for dreams I'd convinced myself were beyond my grasp. We're both better people because we crossed paths that night at the diner, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to live up to the faith you placed in me." They stood together in companionable silence, watching the last guests trickle out of the ballroom, and Veronica realized that this was the real victory, not the scholarship or the job or even Michael's dramatic intervention at the party, but this quiet moment of connection between two human beings who had recognized something valuable in each other and chosen to nurture it. This was what transformation looked like in its truest form. Not a single dramatic gesture, but an ongoing commitment to showing up for each other, to calling each other toward our best selves, to creating the kind of world where everyone had the opportunity to thrive, regardless of the circumstances they were born into. Years would pass and Veronica would go on to earn her doctorate in social work, eventually running her own non-profit organization focused on educational access for underserved communities. Marcus would indeed become an engineer, designing sustainable infrastructure for developing communities around the world. The scholarship fund would grow to serve thousands of students, and the Sterling Heights Country Club would become a model for how institutions of privilege could transform themselves into genuine forces for positive change. Bradford and Melanie would spend decades trying to atone for their moment of cruelty, becoming unexpected advocates for racial justice and educational equity. But all of that was still to come. Still potential waiting to be realized through hard work and sustained commitment. In that moment, standing in the emptying ballroom with Michael Jordan beside her, Veronica Chen simply felt grateful to be alive, grateful for the chance to build a better future for herself and her brother, grateful for the reminder that one person's courage and kindness could change the entire trajectory of another person's life, and grateful most of all for the opportunity to pass that gift along to others who would come after her, creating ripples of transformation that would spread further than any of them could possibly imagine, proving that the real measure of success wasn't found in personal achievement, but in how many people we lifted up along the way. Veronica's story reminds us that one moment of courage can change everything, and that standing up for what's right always matters. So tell us, where are you watching from today? Drop your city and country in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button to help spread this message of kindness and standing up against injustice. And subscribe to our channel so you never miss another inspiring story like this one. Together we can create a world where everyone treats each other with dignity and respect. Now click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible story that will restore your faith in humanity.